Well, welcome back to the hot seat. I'm delighted today to be speaking to Katie Newbury, who's a partner at Kingsley Napley here in London. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about the electronic travel authorisation, but before we get into all the detail of that, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your practice at Kingsley Napley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in the immigration team at Kingsley Napley. And as a team, we cover everything. So that might be business immigration, working for large and small corporates. But I personally deal with private individuals. So that will be everything from business people looking to set up businesses in the UK, people who might have talents in specific areas. So we do a lot of work at the moment for people in digital technology, but also family migration, including kind of slightly niche areas like international surrogacy and adoption. And we also help people who have more complex issues, for example, in people in need of international protection in the UK.
Great. I mean, London remains a popular place, doesn't it? And there's a whole variety of drivers that bring people into the country, fortunately. And you're at the sharp end of that, trying to help them make it happen.
Absolutely, yes.
Fantastic. So just looking in then at this ETA, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the electronic travel authorisation, which we're going to call ETA for short, is going to be a new scheme which has started to be rolled out already, actually, and will apply to people who are non-visa nationals. So that means that they would normally be able to come to the UK as visitors without first applying for a visa. And it's going to be sort of broadly equivalent to what people might be familiar with in the US, the ESTA scheme. So people have to apply in advance of coming to the UK as visitors for authorisation, which will allow them to get on a plane and travel here.
And it's all online, is it? Is it all pretty seamless in the online platform?
I mean, that is the hope. So far, it's only been rolled out to Qatari nationals, and it was rolled out in October of this year. So whether the system is going to remain seamless when it's rolled out to the millions of visitors that the UK welcomes every single year, we shall see. But the idea is that you would upload a copy of your travel document and a selfie on an online platform, and you should be able to do that fairly quickly. And for the majority of people, we hope that they will be able to do this easily and they'll get a 2-year travel authorisation. For some people, it may become slightly more complex.
And so what are some of the key dates in this rollout? How is it being rolled out?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, it rolled out to Qataris in October 2023. It will be rolled out in February to some more countries, so the United Arab Emirates, Saudi, Bahrain, and then from later on next year, it's going to be rolled out to everybody else. So the plan is that by the end of 2024, all non-visa nationals who don't have long-term visas for the UK or British citizenship will have to apply for one of these authorisations.
Have you had any feedback from any Qataris you happen to have been dealing with so far? Or it's such a small sample, I suppose, of a rollout, it's hard to read.
I think it's a small sample, and it's a probably slightly off-season time of year as well for people coming to the UK. So I think those issues are probably going to start trickling through.
It's watch this space.
Exactly.
And who will it impact, do you feel?
Yeah, so I think the main people it's going to impact is anybody who has any kind of criminal background. So some people will be automatically excluded from the ETA, so if you've ever received a custodial sentence of more than 12 months, but also if you've received any kind of criminal conviction in the last 12 months before you're looking to apply, then you're going to be kicked out of the ETA system and you're going to have to apply for a visa. If you have other criminal background, you also could be kicked out of the ETA system. It will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Similarly, anyone who has any kind of immigration complexity, so if they've previously overstayed, breached their conditions, all those kinds of issues will mean that you get thrown out of the ETA system and put into the more sort of burdensome visa system, which also will take a lot longer, which people will need to think about if they're planning to visit the UK.
Because it would be a sort of tick box drop down type thing on all of these questions, and if you're answering no to the wrong one, as it were, if that's the truth, then that will cause your issue, will it? And that will require people to go out and do something more complicated. So it removes the subtlety, I suppose.
It does. And it also, potentially, there are some people who have been travelling here without issue, who, if their previous background was known by an immigration officer, they may face more difficulty coming into the UK. So those people now might face slightly more substantive issues about whether they can actually come to the UK at all going forward.
And I mean, what's the reasoning for bringing this in?
Yeah, so it's actually being done sort of in coordination with the EU as well, who are bringing in an ETIAS system. And the idea is to kind of have this standard system whereby everybody has to clear these hurdles before they get on a plane and come to the UK or the EU. most of the questions are to do with those sort of suitability criteria. So it's about sort of national security, strengthening our borders, the sorts of concerns that we know that the Home Office has had for a long time.
But it's also going to help authorities to monitor day count and where people are at any one particular point with greater
potentially.
Yeah.
We don't know how that will be used in coordination with the e-gates that we know have been rolled out for a lot of nationalities now coming into the UK. But it is possible that there will be a closer scrutiny going forward of the amount of time people spend as visitors in the UK.
And the concerns that this might raise for applicants is it's just more complicated to come to the UK in the first place, so they might therefore come less or think about coming less.
Yeah, I mean, I think people who visit the UK regularly will be aware, will want to get their authorization or their visas.
Yeah.
The issue is if you do have to go down the visa route, that is going to take a lot more time, that there is more of a risk that you are refused. And there's just a lot more for people to think about that haven't previously had to engage with UK immigration.
Because what would some of the visa options then be? I mean, if people are then looking at that as a result of this, what kind of things would they start to think about in order to make plans?
Yeah, so the majority of people are going to be looking at visit visas. And the main sort of thrust of those applications is going to be dealing with the issues that have got them kicked off of the ETA system. So, explaining the background to any criminal history, looking at previous immigration issues, explaining why those shouldn't make somebody fall for refusal under what we have as the general grounds of refusal in the UK. But it might be that people think, actually, I've been spending a lot of time in the UK, so maybe now is my time to consider other options for spending more time in the UK. So, in the absence of an investor visa for sort of high net worth clients, we would be looking at, is there a business that they're interested in working for or starting in the UK? And if they are, do they want to start that business, get a sponsor license and potentially sponsor themselves? Or do they want to look at the innovator visa, which is for people who have kind of innovative business ideas? As I mentioned, we also have a lot of clients in particular sectors like technology, where there are specific visas for people who are particularly well regarded in those particular sectors. And I think that's also an increasingly popular visa option for lots of high net worth individuals.
Because like the business and the commercial routes, the studying routes, the niche areas like the family offices and things like that, there's still lots of opportunity, isn't there? It's I suppose the investor visa afforded people who are perhaps retired or without the commercial interests. Is it? I mean, how do you see it in the high net worth space for accessing the UK through the visa routes?
Yeah,
What's the key bits?
Yeah, I think that as long as people want to be economically active, there's still plenty of opportunities. The challenge, as you say, are for those retired individuals, dependent family members, people who just wanted to be able to spend more time here. And there are still limited options available. But for those who are happy to be economically active, we have some really good routes. The challenges for those people, as opposed to, say, when they came on something like an investor visa, are more logistical. So if you want to start a business in the UK and then sponsor yourself, that business needs a UK bank account. Getting a UK bank account set up while you're not based here can be really challenging. So it's how we sort of navigate those logistical issues with the visa options that we have now.
And are the business plans also interrogated quite hard? You've got to have relevant commercial experience. Coming up with a business idea. Well, there's 1,000 ideas out there, but when people are looking at these visa applications, it obviously all has to add up, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, for the innovator route, absolutely.
Yeah.
People need to have, business ideas which have been fully thought through and that are offering something genuinely innovative, that they have the relevant experience to bring to that role, starting that business. If we're looking at something like starting a business and getting a sponsor license, the important thing is that business is genuine, that it's going to be active in trading, that business will be in a position to pay the salaries that it needs to pay, looking at those kinds of issues as opposed to necessarily the kind of detail of the business plan.
And just zooming out a bit, I mean, which sort of countries do you see inquiries coming for the UK for the most? I mean, I was in the US a few weeks ago, and there's obviously still a lot of Americans very interested in coming to the UK for a variety of reasons. Been out in the Middle East also, there's lots of interest in demand. I mean, where do you see as the sort of key points of inquiries for people looking at coming to the UK to become resident?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest jurisdiction still is the US, for sure. And I think that also talking to people kind of in the private wealth space, you can see that there are increasing offerings for people who have US citizenship and are in the UK. So it's very clear that there is still a lot of interest from the US. And that also tallies with, the tech sector, which again is where we see the majority of those clients coming from. I think that as ever with immigration, we have to look at where there is instability in the world. That will often drive immigration, and that's certainly driving immigration at the moment. And we see that from particular jurisdictions.
And we're also about to go through some political change here in the UK. There's a lot more as we build up to another election next year. Is there anything that you see in the political parties of new approaches on immigration that might sort of change the landscape, or what, from a policy perspective, what do you hear from?
Yeah, I mean, I think very, very topically, the current government is sort of putting out rumours over this week that we're going to see a real approach to cutting legal migration and possibly, raising salary levels for people who are working here, reducing the ability to bring dependents to the UK. So I think under the current government, we could see further cuts to the routes that we have. I think that if we have a change of government, I think that there's not going to be anything groundbreaking. I think if anything, we might see less focus, which will just allow us to get on with the routes that we have. But I think for sort of people coming to the UK, I think what they want right now is certainty. And so I think we might see an uptake once we have had an election and people know one way or the other the way things are going. Because at the moment, I think people just feel that there's a lack of clarity about lots of things, not just the immigration piece, but obviously the tax piece as well. And once we have more certainty about where that's going, I think we'll see an uptick in interest again.
And are you still seeing repercussions and reverberations from Brexit, and in terms of how Europeans are managing access to the UK as well? What's happening on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a statistic this week that migration from the EU is down 70%, which is obviously massive.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that reflects the fact that businesses now, because they can hire as easily from other countries as they can from the EU, are often looking further afield. So we are seeing, large numbers of people coming from other jurisdictions outside of the EU. But also perhaps there's just I don't know how happy people from the EU are in coming to the UK and with everything as it is. So we still see some interest. We have been doing visa applications for EU nationals, but it's obviously significantly down on where we were pre-Brexit.
And how do you tend to find you work with other departments in Kingsley Napley? Because you have the real estate team, you have private client. I imagine that having that full service is great, because you can go into meetings with other colleagues to kind of leverage the full expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a sort of private wealth group within Kingsley Napley, which allows us to work quite collaboratively and in a less siloed way. So, whether that's getting pre-immigration tax planning advice from our private client team, helping people with purchasing property, looking at things like post-nups for families that are coming to the UK with our family team. But also we have kind of slightly more niche areas. So if people have concerns about their reputation, we have a reputation management team. If people get themselves into trouble with driving offences, for example, we have a very well-renowned criminal team. So it allows us to really help people all the way through their journey to living in the UK.
Fantastic. Well, look, Katie, great to talk to you today, and we look forward to sharing this interview.
Thanks so much, David.